Alright guys, welcome back to another Madden video, and now that the franchise mode deep dive is officially out in the open, it came out earlier this morning but probably will have come out yesterday by the time you see this, and it pretty much had a lot of what we already knew from the article that came out earlier this week. But as promised, I'm going to be having a bunch of videos coming out to talk about the new CFM features, what I like, what I don't like, and just give you guys my general thoughts about each of them. And once I've done all of those videos, I'll probably end up doing a recap video as well, where I'll just give my overall thoughts on the entirety of the franchise features this year, as well as the overall direction of CFM. So just be aware when I'm talking about these things in these videos, it's pretty much inside the box of the feature itself and not CFM as a whole. And then as with every video like this, it's strictly my opinion, so I'm not speaking for anyone but myself, and I don't ever want to force my opinion on others. I always want you guys to judge for yourselves, and if we disagree, we disagree. We're still all in this together. So if I like something or I don't like something, that doesn't mean it sucks. If I do like something, that doesn't mean it's amazing or that you have to like it as well. That sounded pretty disclaimery, but anyways, first off, today we're going to be starting with custom draft classes. So just to go over the feature real quick, for those of you that don't know, custom draft classes is going to allow you to create and share unique draft classes. It's going to allow you to edit 450 incoming rookies, so that's going to include 224 players that will be drafted in the 7 rounds, and then 126 undrafted free agents as well. You can edit everything about a player, whether it be player info, appearance, equipment, player ratings, or traits. Everything is available to be edited. And this is a bit of a weird one for me because this wasn't something that was on my top 5 list, and to be honest, it probably wouldn't even have cracked my top 10 when it comes to what I'd like to see in franchise. Custom draft classes have just never been something that excited me too much. That being said though, I'm not oblivious to what the community wants, and this was something that I would constantly see popping up in other people's wish lists. So while it's not something that I myself put a lot of importance on, I definitely understand the place it had and the importance it held within the community, and so I'm happy for those that really wanted it, that they were able to get that in, because it shows me, and it should show you guys at the very least a little bit, that they are listening, and that the more and harder we push for certain things, the more likely that they have a chance of being in the game and ending up in the game. And for those of you that don't know, one of my major gripes over the years has always been the fact that I always felt like a lot of the CFM features that we'd end up getting didn't seem like things that people or the community wanted. They were definitely things that I didn't want, and it felt like a lot of the time they were basically giving us stuff that they thought we wanted, and then on top of that they would be things that often didn't really add to CFM. But I definitely can't say that with custom draft classes. This is something the community desperately wanted and has wanted for years, so regardless of how I personally look at it, I can't sit here and knock the fact that there's going to be a ton of people, or that there already are a ton of people happy with this. I remember in Madden 13 when importing draft classes was removed when CFM was first introduced, and the backlash and demand for it to come back that happened there. And then it did come back, but only for the 1 year before NCAA unfortunately was shut down, which then turned the focus from being able to import classes to having custom draft classes. And it's also one of those things that gets brought up whenever the comparison between CFM and 2K's franchise mode comes up, and it's something I believe 2K has had for quite a few years now. But so like I said, so even though it's not necessarily my thing, I think it's something that should be in the game, as well as definitely being something that adds to franchise mode. So I'm happy for everyone that's been out there pounding the table for this and hoping for it to be in the game, to now finally have that option, because it's going to be huge for them, and ultimately those people that wanted it are going to be the ones who can make this feature so cool. So my personal thoughts on the feature itself, again, are kind of mixed, and that's mainly just because I don't know at this point. The more I've thought about it though, I'm pretty excited to see what the community does with this feature. The reason that it's never been high on my list is because it was something that I was just unlikely to utilize. Unless the stock draft classes were absolutely terrible, I'm just not gonna spend the amount of time it takes to go through and create and edit that many guys. I'd rather just play. And then on top of that, I enjoy the mystery of not knowing about prospects, and if I'm the one editing them, then I lose that, which then in turn ruins scouting and pretty much drafting as well. But that's where the community aspect comes back into play. I know there are tons of people out there, whether it just be for fun or for online leagues or even just for their own solo CFMs, that are going to be putting the time in to go through and make draft classes. And that community aspect is what I think is both kind of the best and worst thing about this feature. And worst probably isn't the right word to use there, but its success is going to be entirely dependent on how the community runs with it. And when you look at the amount of rosters that pop up in the roster share at the beginning of the season every year, and then even through the Super Bowl and free agency and the draft, I have to imagine that this is going to be something that is very similar and likely to be even more popular, since editing a draft class is a lot less daunting than editing and moving 2,400 guys across the entire league. On the flip side of that though, if this somehow does turn out to be something that the community doesn't embrace and run with, then it has the potential to completely flop as one of those big franchise features. Like I said though, I'm confident that that won't be the case, just based on the amount of people that requested the feature, as well as the amount of authentic and unique rosters that come out every year, that there will be plenty of people out there more than willing to put the time in to make some incredible draft classes. One thing I'm unsure about, however, is how storylines are going to play into all of this. And what I mean is, I don't know if based on how you edit players, the stories are going to adapt and apply to players based on what you give them. So say you edit a player with superstar dev, a Heisman story would apply to him, or if they're just tied to those specific players within the draft, and even if you edit player A, he's still going to have that story tied to him, even if you change all of his numbers around. And if that could also change his numbers after you edit him, which is something I could see being a potentially big problem there as well. But looking at how this affects CFM overall though, again, it's kind of tough. The main thing I always stress when it comes to CFM is having as many things that incentivize you to get through the season as possible and enhance the longevity of the mode. And this is something that definitely has the potential to do that. You're drafting and scouting every year, but I'm just not sure it does enough or will have enough of an impact to really push that longevity, at least in terms of the mode this year, which is part of the reason why it was so low on my priority list. And don't get me wrong, I know it's going to be something that is able to do that for a lot of people, and especially online leagues, but just coming from my perspective as a solo player, my initial thoughts were that even in the case where I am utilizing this feature, it isn't something that's going to drastically change my current CFM experience a whole lot, and it could actually end up having a negative impact on some of the things as well. So like I mentioned earlier, I could create a custom draft class for myself, but by doing so, I now know the ratings and dev trait for every player that I edit, and what happens with that is that the need to scout is now all but eliminated. And then to that same effect, when you get to the draft, in that you'd more or less know all the players that are going into the draft. And obviously with the share feature, you can download someone else's class, but then in doing that, you have to trust that the classes are balanced well, or it could potentially have a long-term negative impact on your CFM there too. I don't think that's going to be a huge issue, it's just a concern of mine. But then going back to CFM, there just still isn't going to be a whole lot to do over the course of the season itself. This isn't something that really branches out and helps any other part of CFM other than the draft. With that being said, I hope when Madden drops that there are tons of people out there creating all kinds of draft classes, because what you're going to be able to do with this feature is truly endless. If you want to create the 1983 draft class with John Elway and Dan Marino, you can do that. If you don't like how draft classes are balanced or tuned, you can go through and change anything within them. Obviously, the elephant in the room is that you're going to be able to create authentic NCAA draft classes for the next couple of years. If you want to just go in and throw in guys like Leon Sandcastle from my thumbnail or a Bobby Boucher, you don't have to put a ridiculous amount of time into this feature to get something out of it. And one thing that I personally would love to see people do is to just take the stock classes and doing things like making random variations of classes that are strong classes or weak classes or a great defensive class and things like that, so that someone like me who wants to keep all of that mystery there and still get something out of the feature is able to get something that someone created that has unique busts and gems that you're not going to be getting with Madden stock rosters. And that kind of goes back to what I talked about when I say that the success of this feature kind of hinges on how the community runs with it. I hope there are people out there creating all kinds of draft classes like that, because I know what people are capable of and the kind of creativity people have when it comes to these sort of things. And the more people that are out there creating those classes, the more people will have to choose from and be able to find something something that they like and will improve their CFM experience. I think one of the biggest positives about this feature though is that it's something that shouldn't need too much tweaking. There are definitely some quality of life type things that I wouldn't mind seeing. If you noticed on the screenshots in the blog, it gives you a nice guide of ranges when editing a player of what's elite, good, average, and poor, and I wouldn't mind seeing something like that being applied to inside the player editor, to where you could put attributes under those certain ranges, so that way you could still edit players and know what they were but not exactly what they were gonna be, and there would still be a little bit of that mystery there. And then another thing I've seen suggested already is a randomizer where you can edit the players but then their information ends up being randomized, so that all of the players that you edited will end up in the draft class, but you're not gonna know who's who, and that's something I would also love to see. So hopefully things like that are coming down the line possibly, but I gotta say that this is a pretty solid base for the feature in its first year, and it should be something that remains in CFM for a long time. All in all though, my general feelings towards the feature are pretty mixed, and mixed probably isn't the right word. I just say overall neutral. Like I said, I'm not gonna hate on it just because it's not for me. If it was something else that wasn't such a high community request, then I would probably be slanted a bit more heavily to the negative side. But like I said before, it's something that definitely adds to CFM. It's undoubtedly a useful feature, and it's a feature that ultimately needs to be there. And now that I'm doing something like the franchise series, I'll definitely be looking to find ways to incorporate it into that, but it's just not something that would have hit me with the same impact that something like full coaching staffs would have. So that's why a bit of a mixed feeling there. That's gonna do it though. Like I said, this will be the first of many feature focuses for franchise. I think I have 5 or 6 more mapped out right now, and then the recap video on top of that. So a lot to go over, but right now the plan is to cover the Meteor CFM features first and then get into the presentation type stuff after that. So that should all be coming in the next week or so, but next up I will be talking about the schemes and player archetypes, and then getting into skill points, the video following that. So stay tuned. Let me know what you guys think of custom draft classes, what your plans are for the feature, and how you intend to use it, because this is something I'll be keeping a close eye on throughout the year, as well as looking for good and cool classes to use. But like I said, that's gonna do it. I hope you guys found something useful from this breakdown and the impressions as well, and as always, thanks for watching.